Live streaming is on.
You see me. Finally. Yeah, I was worried it would happen the same we had yesterday, guys, which took like 20 minutes to get in. So I don't trust YouTube, just so you know. So let me try the screen. Yes, it's working. We're in. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good whatever, wherever you are, whenever you are in this part of the world, or you're watching it live, or you're watching it in zombie mood. Zombie mood is if you're not watching it live. Get it? Anyway, public service announcement. Wear your fucking mask. I say it every day. It's not for you. It's for everybody. Maybe you will survive it, but if you don't wear it, maybe you will kill somebody else. So, in the immortal words of somebody that is not polite, that is me, don't be an asshole. With that said, hello to my dear friend, Frank Riley. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, David. Good to speak to you again.
I'm sorry for the speech, but I gotta say it. I've seen so many idiots around that they need to be told to their face they're fucking idiots.
Well, we're actually, I'm in Glasgow in Scotland, and we're actually we've got really good nowadays at wearing masks when we're inside shops.
Mm-hmm.
I still see people in the street not wearing masks, which I think is okay if it's not busy, but everybody that goes into shops is certainly wearing a mask. So.
Yeah, here it's more or less the same. There's always the idiots, as I said. Most of the people listens and wears the mask. Mostly it's been known. If you have the space to walk, that you don't have to wear it. But if you are in closest supermarket, whatever,
public transport,
wear it. But since they're worried now about a second wave, because of they open to tourism and all that, which I don't agree with, but I understand because the economy is tanking, especially with people coming from England. The huge amount of the tourists we have in southern Spain, as you know, and in Mallorca, and nothing is under control in England, as you know. You guys in Scotland have it well under control, not in England. So we are getting a lot of tourists, so everybody's worried about second wave coming. So in Andalusia and in Catalonia, and I think that on the parts of Spain they're going to do it too. They are putting into law that you have to wear mask at all times, just to avoid. Maybe you are not, but there could be somebody around you that is infected. So gotta be careful. Anyway, how's things for you? How's things for you, for the family, for the world around you? How's everything?
Oh, good. I've watched a few of these talks that you've done.
I'm sorry.
With other comic creators, and it seems to be a common thread that life has changed less for us than it has for most people. Most comic writers and most comic artists work in isolation anyway. Many of us work at home, so that side of it didn't make a huge difference to me. I've been working at home since last year. So, and what's nice for me is the fact that my wife and 3 kids have all been working from home as well. So it's been good from that point of view. And I think probably the only thing I really miss is going out for food. It's like sitting somewhere, like in a restaurant, breakfast, lunch, dinner. I don't go out all the time, but I go out more often than I've been able to because I haven't been out for months now. So,
yeah, but many people is telling me that they miss the cons, but not the cons by themselves, But like seeing people. We were talking about JG this morning, and it's that thing, where you can just go out in a con and I meet you, you meet me, or we meet people who we haven't seen in months or years, and you're like, shit. It's the people you're expecting to see, which is fine. But the most fun for me, the thing that makes me happy is to see the people you are not expecting in that dinner. And then sit down and they start talking shop or whatever for like 3 hours. And then go back home and talk to AJ or to Paloma in my case. You know what? I spent 3 hours with this guy who I haven't spoken to in 3 years. That's what makes it worth for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But, I suppose the cons will come back at some point, but it's too early for that now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. People keep asking me if we're going to have, the one in Madrid in December, and I'm like, that could be because it's December. It's the end of the year. Before that, I don't see anything happening. And if anybody wants to do one, I think they're in a big problem. Like people is still expecting New York Comic Con is going to happen.
Mhm.
And I'm like, guys, the Javits right now is a hospital for COVID people. And
Mhm.
Cuomo called, Trump and said, we need to have this open until the beginning of October. So imagine they tell you to go to Artis Alley, remember, on the basement.
Yeah.
And they tell you, oh, this has been a hospital for COVID people until 2 weeks ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course, they will clean it amazingly well, blah, blah, blah. But if they tell you that, it's like, no.
It's not going to give you much confidence.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. But do you miss going to the movies at all? Or you and AJ don't usually go to the movies?
We used to go to the movies a lot, and then we had kids, and we went far less often. And we never really get back into the habit of going on a regular basis. But the last twice I was at the cinema, both times I saw the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
And this coming from someone who has watched very few of the Marvel and DC movies over the years. But I was invited, myself and a friend who's a professor at Glasgow University. We were invited to go to watch the Joker at an early screening with a journalist, so that the three of us could sit and have a drink after it and discuss rather than the journalist just giving his own opinion. He wanted to have a kind of roundtable discussion, and I loved it. I thought it was great.
Nice. That sounds really nice, actually.
And then I was over in last year, later on last year. It was just a few weeks after that. I was in Toronto with Anne Jane and the three kids to see the Jupiter's Legacy set, and we had the last day we had checked out of the hotel, but we weren't flying out until the evening. And I said, "What does everybody want to do?" And one of my sons said, "Why don't we go to the cinema?" And everybody wanted to see the Joker, so I went. I was happy to watch it again. So, that was a. Wow, I don't know. Was it October or something? I can't remember what month it was.
I guess so. Yeah, October, November. But so you actually like the movie?
Yes, I did. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good.
It wasn't perfect, but I enjoyed it. I went in with no expectations, which is always a good way to go into a movie. And I felt it was maybe a little slow for the first third, maybe. And when I got to the end of it, the first time I'd seen it, I wasn't sure how much of the stuff with his female neighbor, how much of that was in his mind. And then when I saw it the second time, I was like, all right, okay, I've got it now.
Yeah, and then the female Sassy Smith, the actress, explained that it's all in his head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, spoilers, guys. The movie was released in October.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that it's a spoiler. No, I had a problem with that movie, and I really don't hate it, but I don't like it much because it reminded me too much. And then I watch it again. King of Comedy, the Scorsese.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when I was watching it, I was like, this is King of Comedy. This is the same movie. And then I watched King of Comedy again at home. And like, yes, it is the same movie, and King of Comedy is better.
Yeah.
That's the part that made me not like, if I haven't seen that or any other 25 Scorsese movies, I would probably like it better. But having watched that one, it's like, this is the same movie. It's just
it would be interesting to see what Robert De Niro thinks of that, given that he presumably saw the script before he committed to being in the movie.
Yeah, but at the same time, I guess that for De Niro was like watching himself in the mirror, if you know what I mean. From the other side, he was that character, and then he is the other character. So I guess that's and of course, and aside of that, De Niro just right now, Pacino and De Niro is like, you have an offer. What is that? Do a Kia advertising. There you go. And I saw yesterday Pacino was doing a coffee advertising for. They just grab whatever they throw at them. So I
Yeah.
don't know if their opinion right now is like just give me a role. Just give me a role. Give me whatever. Give me whatever. I will
Fair
say
enough.
it. I don't care. I will say it. So you were in the set, and what did you think about that?
Oh, it was great. It was really exciting. I hadn't been in a movie set before, so being in a movie set for something that I had drawn was it was pretty exciting. And I met the people that work in the special effects department, the people that work in the costume department, the models and props. Yeah, it was a great experience. It was
How
really
was
good.
it for you to see? I'm not going to ask for spoilers, and don't worry about it. But although things you cannot tell, of course. But how was it for you to see actual people wearing your costumes?
It was kind of funny.
Because if I were me, I would be looking at it saying, "This is bizarre." Just I could just think that. How was it for you?
It was bizarre. Yeah, it was bizarre. I'm going to reserve my judgment until I actually see it on television. Mark was saying that I should go to his house once lockdown's over, and I can watch some of the early edits.
Mhm.
But I'm really curious to actually see how it's going to translate. I don't know if I want to see early edits or if I'll just wait and watch it with everybody else. I don't know yet.
Yeah, I watched a couple. I watched a couple pics, and to be honest, I was like, I don't know if it's gonna work. But it happens with most of the superhero TV shows or movies. Actually, I was remembering a conversation I had with. I don't remember his name, but it's a guy that does design for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he was always telling me, don't even trust the trailers. What you see on the trailers is never finished. There's a lot of lighting effects. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the suits that is never on until you see the finished product. Like I said, and sometimes not even that, because you have to rush and release the movie, and then on the DVD or Blu-ray, people doesn't realize, but we have changed things because we didn't have time to do it in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that until you see what you said, you see the first edits, maybe the first edits won't even have the finished version.
Yeah.
But I got a question for you. Why comics? I mean, of course you had, aside of the fact that you probably were reading it since you were a kid, like most of everybody else. Of course, you have the chance as an artist to go illustration, to do a storyboarding for movies, whatever the other options you can think of, animation, etc. Why comics? Why did you say this is what I want to do?
I went to Glasgow School of Art, and I wanted to use my creative talents to make money. I didn't want a regular job. I wanted to work as some kind of artist. And if I had got the offer to be a portrait artist or a mural artist or a guy that just did album covers or T-shirt designs or book illustration, it wouldn't have mattered. I would have taken anything. Mm-hmm. And for the first couple of years after art school, I did a little bit of everything. And one of the things that I did was comic book work, and it was a self-published, like a small press indie thing in Glasgow. It was very local, and I don't know if it happened straight away, but it happened very quickly. Mm-hmm. That I started realizing there was something about comics. There was something about telling a story with a comic strip that was different from everything else. Mm-hmm. And the more I did it, the more I liked it. And the more I did it, the more I saw the possibilities. I thought you could really do anything with this. There's no budget. You're only restricted by time and your own abilities, your own shortcomings. And that's something you can work on mm-hmm. as you're doing it.
But your shortcomings, knowing you, you said your shortcomings limit you. I don't think they limit you. Knowing you enough, I know that the shortcomings make you work around and find another solution, which is what you have been doing for years.
Sure, yeah, of course. You can't run away from your shortcomings. You have to work with them and work around them. But also, like, I think we all hope that the more we do something, at least the more we do something in earnest, with as much intelligent forethought as possible, and with as much experience, we hope that we're slowly getting better the more we do it, and I hope I never lose that ambition, that drive. Yeah, but that's why comics. It's just because I see comics as being something that's absolutely unique.
That's what I keep repeating to most of the guests I've just seen. I am a pain in the ass talking about the uniqueness of comics and the uniqueness of the language, and that we are the only ones who can defy in the fucking universe Einstein's theory of relativity, because we control time and space from the first corner or the first frame or the first panel to the last one. We can define a story and say this is going to happen in a second, from page 1 to page 20 or page 60. This is going to happen in a second per panel. We're going to split time and go back and in, as many times. And you've worked with Grant many times, and in that, one of the things I love the most about your collaborations is that you always play a lot with the language. Many people remembers what Alan did on Watchmen, like having, I would say, the Cyclops Pertec panel in the first issue where she's in the back and it seems like nothing is happening. And then on issue 5, we go back, she's in the forefront, and then we are like, shit, that was the same moment. And she was looking at that action that we didn't see. But you guys took it to the stream in many cases. Like, the perfect example people is going to say all around is Pax Americana, where you guys are at all times playing with the language. How important for you is to play with the language, or not even the word plays, maybe the word play is not correct, just using the uniqueness of the language as much as possible?
It's important for some projects, and with Pax Americana, Grant was very keen that the two of us collaborated to really push as hard as we could to make the language of comics work for this comic book story in a way that it couldn't in any other medium. That was important to the story. It was far less important to the story with something like All-Star Superman or Jupiter's Legacy. It was more appropriate to keep the reader in the narrative rather than to risk drawing them out of the narrative because they were being either confused or impressed with the cleverness of the storytelling. So it's not always appropriate to push as hard as you can at the boundaries, but the boundaries in comics are very, very broad, and the breadth, the choice of what you can do in a comic to tell the story is something that's worth exploring, because there's different ways to present the story itself depending on how you use the techniques of the medium.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. How broad are the limits, which is also really, really interesting for younger creators to learn, is not that you can just push the boundaries. It's that I can do it, so I will do it at all times. It's the story you want to tell, because we are storytellers. You guys are storytellers above it all. Is the one that determines if you are going to push those boundaries or push other boundaries, or just not push them and be more linear in terms of what you want to tell, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes, like, to use an example in film, sometimes you can be watching a television program, maybe a soap opera, and you never actually notice the camera work, and then you watch a Scorsese or a Francis Ford Coppola or a Kubrick or something, and you can't help but notice the camera work. Now, generally speaking, because I appreciate that kind of thing, it doesn't really draw me out of the story, but if you got that kind of camera work in a soap opera, it would pull you right out of the narrative.
Yeah.
So you do have to be selective about how you approach these things. But it's interesting you're mentioning kind of younger generation, because I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's already interesting what people are doing with digital comics.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of digital comics. I prefer to have the comic in my hand, but that way you effectively, the bottom right-hand panel of every page on a comic is effectively a mini cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you have a digital comic that's designed to be read digitally, so it's not like a whole traditional page that you have to scroll around. If you have a comic that's designed to be seen one panel at a time, each panel effectively becomes a mini cliffhanger, and the way you transition from one panel to another can vary a great deal as well. But it's something I've thought about a little for my own work, but it's not been a priority for me, just because digital comics aren't such, they don't hold my interest sufficiently.
Yeah, but it's a worthy discussion, I guess, in terms of even theoretically about the language, because what I keep repeating is when I see, Marvel, DC, the majors, just doing digital comics, I keep coming back. Oh, but digital comics don't sell. They're in a plateau and that's it. And I'm like, oh, because you just grab like a physical comic, put it in Comixology, do the guided view, and that's it. Of course, people is going to prefer to read them in paper, because you're in the same. You gotta reinvent the language. Maybe it's not going to be even comics. I know Charlie. I was talking to him the other day. He's doing something for webtoons, and he's telling me I am trying to use a different kind of language, because it's not the same medium. It's, as you said, panel by panel. But Scott McCloud, he was here. He was saying, no, that's not how you read digital comics. You have to scroll down, and if you scroll down, where's the cliffhanger? Because there is not. You just scroll down. If you close the chapter, you can say end of chapter, start again. But if you're scrolling down, how do you do the cliffhanger? In terms of traditional comics, I don't think you can.
Yeah. One thing I would avoid is anything that starts looking like a halfway house between animation and comics.
Absolutely.
That kind of motion comic thing never worked for me.
Yes. Some of my artists had to do Infinite Comics for Marvel, and that was like absolutely crazy, because it was such a weird mix, and they have to do this head 9 times for this panel, and also that, and it's like, what are we doing here? Are we doing animation? Are we doing comics? Are we doing something in the middle? So it's I think that's what I was trying to tell you. If you agree to ask you, I mean, that if you do digital comics, you just have to decide, break the barrier. This is a different language. Let's stop pretending it's comics. We have to think about it as something else. Or do you think it can be told as traditional comics?
My gut instinct is saying we should probably view it as being something slightly different from a traditional comic. Partly because it would help avoid the disappointment of it not being a comic, and partly because it might encourage us to find a satisfactory way of making it work, the transitions from panel to panel or whatever. I think it would be worth treating it as something at least partly new, like a kind of subgroup of comics.
Yeah. What do you think is that when you're when you get a script from Mark, for Grant, from whoever, what's the first thing you look for in terms of how to think about the layouts of a page? It's like, I got to design the layouts, I got to prepare the thumbnails of the page. What is the first thing you look for instinctively? Do you look for the backgrounds, the architecture, or do you look for the character work? What is first for you? And I mean, don't think about it instinctively.
It's actually dictated by the script, because if the establishing shot on this page is some giant piece of alien architecture that resembles whatever it resembles, I start building up an image, like a composition of some great piece of some great shape stretching up. If the page of script I'm reading through is an awkward or heartfelt conversation between two people, I'm not generally thinking about the background or the setting. I'm thinking about the emotion, the dialogue, and the subsequent facial expression and body language. Every now and again, like the writer's going to say something like, we're going to a double page splash of a cityscape in the middle of the city's collapsing inwards. And you start imagining that as you're reading it. But it tends to just be based on the script. And the way I always approach it is I read the script start to finish. And it's really a strong preference that I get the whole script. I've worked on a number of occasions where I've got 4 pages of something, and then I get another 6 pages later, and then I get 2 pages, and it can be quite dissatisfying when you get halfway through something and think, well, if I'd known this was coming up, I would have done that differently.
Yeah.
But before I ever start thumbnailing, I always read the script through as many times as I feel I need to, so that I can just see it as a story.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm not seeing it as a comic book. I'm not seeing it as a movie. It's the way if somebody tells you what they were doing yesterday, or if they're describing a movie that you haven't seen, but they're just telling it as a story, and you're just going with that story. You're not really seeing it set out like it's like cinematically or layouts on a page. It's just a story that's in your mind. And I read through the script until I've really got that, and then I start the thumbnailing. And it's a preference to start the thumbnailing in order.
Yeah, so you get the story in your head, and from that you develop what and how you want to tell it, right?
Yeah.
I was asking because some people tells me I'm always drawn by the characters. It's always the characters first, and some people says is the description, is the setting. So that was I was asking if you have any preference, but that actually makes more sense. The story dictates, as we were saying, the story dictates where you have to go. When you're working, do you need absolute silence, or do you need cacophony, as I do with some sound around, or it depends on the page? It depends if it's layouts. It depends if it's pencils. How does it work in your case?
If I'm thumbnailing a script, reading a script or thumbnailing a script, I can have music, but instrumental music. If once I've got all the thumbnailing down, then I can be listening to any kind of music. I can be listening to a podcast or a lecture, and when I'm inking or colouring, it's the same. The only thing I don't do is I don't have a movie on. I don't have something visual. I wouldn't watch television while I'm working, and I know some artists who do, and they say they're just kind of dividing their attention, or they're just watching it peripherally. But that doesn't work for me.
I honestly, except for I don't remember who it was who told me I put movies, but movies that I have watched like 20 times.
Right.
So that way I just hear, and since I know it in my head, the visuals, I don't turn around. But in other cases, when they say, no, I just have a movie, Netflix or something, like, how can you, be trying to concentrate on drawing and not even, I would be all the time, that's turning around. And,
me too.
I haven't watched it, so I need to watch it. Why don't you write yourself? Why did you aside of the fact, of course, no offense intended for Grant or Mark, because they're amazing writers, genius writers. Why did you decide not to write yourself?
Well, I have the last few years I have written for myself. I haven't brought anything out yet. I started off when I was working on Electric Soup, the underground comic. I wrote my own stories. They were generally terrible, but I wrote my own stories. And then maybe about more than 5 years ago, I started writing short stories that I would like to draw as short comic strips. But I was always busy. I wasn't just busy, I was always behind in my deadlines. And I was doing Pax Americana and Jupiter's Legacy at the same time. And
At the
I was
same time.
late. I was late with both of them. But I was still wrestling with a couple of short stories that I was writing for myself, just because I wanted to do that rather than do the work I was supposed to be doing. And I was in a studio at the time, and there were some animators who were friends of mine, and they were applying for, in Scotland. There are certain, Scotland's actually quite good for, in some ways, it's quite good for supporting the arts. And there's an open call for people who want to make a short film who haven't had any prior experience. And they're commercial animators doing, adverts for products and, After Effects for television shows and things like that, and always wanting to work on original content instead. And they asked me if they knew I'd been writing short stories, and they asked if I had anything that would suit for a short CGI animation, because it was CGI that they did. And I had a short horror story that I thought would suit. And the way you do it is you write the story in, I think it's 100 words, and then again in 500 words, and that's how you submit it, so that the people on the other end who are receiving the submissions can read the short version and go, no, we've already had 10 of them, or if they think maybe, then they'll read the longer version. And from the open call, they chose, I think it was maybe 15 or 16 projects. So I was on as writer and character designer. One of the animators was the director. Somebody else was building the models. And what happens is you go on a course. It's called a story development workshop. And you have to go along, say, 6 full days spread out over 3 weekends. And they show you short films by Jane Campion and Peter Mullen. And they show you films that they think you should be watching and talking about, because you'll learn something from them. And then they give you worksheets, and you sit and have group discussions. And it's like, what do you learn about the character in the first 30 seconds? What's their backstory? What's their predicament? What's their dilemma? What's at stake? Why do you care? And then, of course, when you're doing that, you've then got to go back and apply that to the story you've written. And my story was quite two-dimensional. And so there was a lot of rewrites to bring it up to to make it richer. And then we decided that it was going to be too expensive to have 3 different characters animated. So I actually had to kill off a couple of characters and have only one person left alive. And it was supposed to be people were dying throughout the story, but we had to jump forward in time and tell the story from the point where there was only one left alive. And so some of the rewriting was with a view to the fact that the story needed more, and some of it was actually because we just couldn't afford to make it, and we had to rewrite it for very practical purposes. But it was a really eye-opening experience for me. And we got chosen, we got shortlisted, and we were one of the 5 projects that got funded. And we made a 6-minute CGI animated horror short. And I think that was 3 years ago now. And it's still not online because it keeps going to different short film festivals. But it will soon. It's called Nothing to Declare, and it will be online at some point. And since then, I've actually I wrote a short screenplay for a live action film with an actor friend of mine. and we were getting somewhat closer to starting it before lockdown. So that's on hold just now. And I also, just as a writing exercise, I took 2 of the short stories that I had written to do as comic shorts, and I decided that I would write a backstory for both of them to justify where the character came from and how they found themselves in the predicament they were in.
Yeah, and the story, maybe the story of those 2 characters you had to kill off the screen, right?
Yeah, well, I could do that, yeah. And then, just as an exercise, I decided, although they were self-contained stories, I treated them as though they were just one little story that happened to that character and what would happen to them after that. And I ended up writing a series of episodic stories for each of them after that, which one of them I'm going back to now because I'm actually talking to another few comic creators about producing an anthology of shorts. So I'm probably going to go back to one of those characters and present at least one short story with a view to getting the character out there, and then I'll look at the idea of maybe doing a 4 or 6 issue thing with it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, Nest, because you were talking about short stories, animation, and all that. And I was going to say, does that mean that as a writer, your interest is in other fields, or you also have interest in writing comics?
Both. I started off writing specifically so that I could draw short comic strips of things that I wanted to draw. You know, I mean, I've got a lot of short stories by Mobius and Katsuhiro Otomo and Alex Toth and, you know, Will Eisner and what Mike Mignola says about, you know, if you're an artist and you want to write yourself a story, write something you want to draw.
Yeah.
You know, you'll enjoy it more. And so it's, as I say, it's been something that I've had on the back burner almost as I shy away from calling it a hobby, but it's almost something I just like to do kind of in my downtime. I just go back to these. I've got various different characters, various different genres, and I'm just kind of, I'm very aware of the fact that I've got limited experience as a writer, so I would be looking to write things that would satisfy me both artistically and for what I look for in a short story. So yes, it's I don't know how long it's going to take, because every time I think I've got some downtime, something else comes up, you know. I mean, I finished Jupiter's Legacy and I thought, that's it, I'm going to do my own stuff now. And I got contacted by a design agency in Glasgow, and Radisson Red were building a hotel in the city. It's only I think there were 5 other Radisson Reds globally. Yep. It's a new brand that they've started for young people. And one of the things they do, although there's a distinct look for each of for the hotels as a group, one of the things that makes each distinct is that they choose an artist from the city the hotel is in to decorate the walls. And so that was a pretty big job. And then I was ready to start doing some short stories after that. And then I was contacted by a musician who wanted an album cover. And that kind of grew arms and legs. And then I was ready to start doing short stories after that. And a marketing guru guy who had seen the Radisson Red Hotel got in touch to see if I'd like to work on a project for a Scotch whisky company, which was actually, it was a narrative project that's about retelling old Scottish myths. And the story needs to be told on 4 sides of a box for one of them, but it also needs to work as a flat image for like a signed numbered print. So it was, again, that was another thing that ended up taking longer and longer. It's a really interesting project, and I'm going to do more of them. And I've kept my hand in doing some covers, and now I've got a secret comic project coming up. It's just a one-issue thing, but I'm actually late starting it, so I need to buckle down and get that done. So I keep promising myself I'm going to get round to drawing up some of these stories that I've written, but it's just not happened yet.
Well, it'll happen eventually, but they keep you busy. How exhausting was to do the hotel thing? Because that sounds like it was really intense.
It was a lot of work. What was nice about it, like with the job I'm doing for the whiskey company, is that I was approached by people that don't know anything about comics, who just happened to like the style of my drawing and trusted the fact that I knew how to tell a story, and asked me to present them with some roughs of some ideas that I had based on the conversations. And I went away and did that. And in both cases, they just said, "We love this, go with it." And so it was I wouldn't want to keep doing things outside of comics and never get back to doing comics again. But it's refreshing to work outside comics sometimes, partly because it gives you a new perspective, but also because it gives you a chance to recharge your creative batteries, and then you feel hungry for going back to comics. Because it's very easy when you're in a long project, like All-Star Superman or Jupiter's Legacy, where it's meant to have taken you 2 years and it ends up taking you 4 years, and you're halfway through it. And it's always a middle section that's tough for me. There's nothing more exciting than starting a new project, and there's nothing more exciting than tying something up that you've been working on. But that middle section, it's like being middle-aged, that middle section can be the bit that's really difficult. And sometimes just stepping out and doing something else, recharged and, refocused and hungry again, so it's
that's what I was going to say, that in a way you are able to use other muscles on your brain, so the muscles that you use every fucking day, you can rest for a while and say, "Leave me alone, I don't want to hear from you in 6 months." And then like 4 months later you're like, "What? It's me, the part that told you to leave me alone. I'm fucking bored. Can I come back?" And you're like, no, you have to wait. But anyway, by the end of the day, it's that part that you've recharged because you've refreshed your brain, etc. That keeps you hungry, right? Because if not, taking the time it takes you to finish those long projects, it could be very easily, burn you, right?
Yeah. I mean, but by the time I was when I was working on Pax Americana and Jupiter's Legacy at the same time, I felt really burnt out. And that feeling of being burnt out stayed with me all the way through Jupiter's Legacy. And by the time I got to the end of Jupiter's Legacy, I was exhausted and I really needed a break. And I hadn't had a break for years at that point. So
for years, for a decade, I think.
Yeah, many years. And so it was really good. It came at the right time when I stepped outside of comics and started doing more writing and started doing jobs for other industries.
Let me say hello to people because maybe they think we are ignoring them. No, we're not ignoring you guys. Chris Noth, oh my God, thanks for making the impossible possible by bringing on Frank quietly. It's not impossible. He's here. He's not a ghost. He's human. Well, I think he's a genius, but he's human. Chris Noth, I have a ton of questions today. Okay, relax. Chief. Let's give space to somebody else, okay? Angel Perez, I can't believe, blah, blah, blah. Stop with the licking my balls, guys. I don't need it. don't bullshit me. This is for the artist, not for me. This is like bringing a very personal comic con to my home. Thank you. Hello to everybody. Angel Perez says, I have the honor to meet Frank in Madrid. I got a signing in my All-Star Superman. He was incredibly kind. He always is incredibly kind. Oh, look, we have a friend here. Jeffrey Jones. I think you know this guy. I've been in love with Frank's work since I first saw him in Flex Mentallo. He's one of the best sequential artists working. What's he coming out with next?
Oh,
Secret?
hi JG. It's there's nothing worse than fans having to sit and listen to two creators saying no. I'm your biggest fan. No, I'm your biggest fan. But yeah, JG's one of these guys who's anytime he has something coming out, it's just like you go and pick it up because it's always just stellar, and he's one of those artists that I see his work and he puts me in the mood to draw. What I've coming out next is I mentioned earlier that I've just started a secret project. It's just one issue. JG, I can email you.
Yeah, email you. Private. Let's talk private.
The barest bones of it.
JG, you're a pro. You don't ask that in public. You know that.
But apart from the secret project, as I've been saying, I've written some short stories, so I'd very much like to start on them. Hopefully later on this year, or at the very latest, early next year.
Nice. Okay, next, Javier Merino. I would like to ask you about the process to develop a story like Pax. What do you think Grant and you and yourself gave each to the story? I guess he means to ask if there was a real separation between the script and what you did, or you guys work as just storytellers, like as a whole.
A bit of both. I mean, most of Pax Americana was full script. But with unfinished dialogue. Grant always re-dialogues after he's seen the artwork. This actually, funnily enough, was one of the projects where I was getting the pages just a few at a time because Grant was very busy doing other things. So that was a downside for me. But as I say, it was mostly finished script, and Grant had mostly described with words well enough what he wanted me to draw, and I just had to take those descriptions, do a few different thumbnail roughs for myself and decide what I thought worked best, and then show it to him to check he was okay with it. The only bit I remember where, and we got together and talked about it a great deal, but the only bit where we were both sitting actually working on it at the same time was the double page spread, which is in the Peacemaker's home. And it's one large room with big sculptural objects in perspective. And there's 3 distinct time zones. There's Peacemaker leaving in the morning. There's his girlfriend getting killed that evening. And then there's the Question with his torch coming round, talking into the dictaphone the night after the police investigation. And Grant had an idea in his mind that we could work left to right, top to bottom, but there would be going up and down stairs, and it would be a complicated looking house, and we could make them walk around in it. And what we had done in one of the earlier pages was we had 2 characters walking down a staircase, and that worked well enough, but it only accounted for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And what we needed was a much longer period of time to tell these 3 narratives. And it didn't seem possible to use a complex system of staircases and corridors to do that. And we talked about it for ages, and eventually I said to Grant, what's actually happening here? And we drew out, he had his own thumbnail script, and he said, we've got like 36 panels or whatever it was. And so I drew these out on a piece of paper, and I said, what's happening in panel 1? And he said, "Oh, right, that's this time zone. It's just the bird cage, blah, blah, blah." And we worked through panel by panel, and I just wrote what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat and looked at it for ages and thought, this needs to be viewed from above, like looking down on a stage. And we'll put large objects. We'll have perspective lines at the sides for the walls, and we'll put large objects around the room, because then we'll know that we're in the same space. And I just worked everything out. It took a long time. It took a long time. But eventually, because it was such a complicated thing Grant was wanting, eventually I found the key to it. The solution was to actually try and do it as simply as possible, because it was what was actually happening was complex enough. And
was it getting actually too complex to tell? You felt I gotta go back and think about it and make it simpler or easier to read in a way?
It seemed to me to be too complex, and the fact that Grant and I together couldn't work out a way of telling it visually that satisfied both of us suggested that we were too caught up in the complexity of it, and we needed to simplify it. And we didn't simplify a word of dialogue, and we didn't simplify any of what Grant wanted to happen. We just took out the idea of staircases and complex architecture to frame the sequence. Yeah, and then of course the colouring had to then reflect the fact there was 3 different time zones, and I actually felt that the two nighttime time zones could have been slightly more different, but I wasn't sure when I brought this up with the editor. I wasn't sure whether or not it was just my monitor, my screen in the studio was reading it differently. But so if they reprint it, I'd love it if they made the colours slightly more distinct. But I feel we eventually nailed it, and it's when you read through it in order, it makes sense, and for a complex idea, it actually does come across.
No, I actually remember, of course, and it works perfectly. But what I thought first time I read it is you probably took a lot more time thinking about how to do it than actually drawing it. And I mean, I know drawing it could have taken a long time, of course.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
When I see, Grant's head when he's about to thumbnail it, like him taking a long time to just draw it. I don't even mean write it. Just doodle it. And in your case, just a long time is like how I can make it work, and that takes more time actually than drawing it, right?
It does. It takes much more time than drawing it.
Is that a pain in the ass, or you accept it as part of the job? I mean, it's a pain in the ass to take more time in thinking about the page than actually drawing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, the only thing that's really a pain in the ass about it is the fact that you don't get paid for all the thought and research and time that it takes to work out what you're going to do with the page before you start drawing it. You only get paid for the drawing you've done. And the panel with the cat in We Three, that took me and Grant together, took us days and days and days to work out before I started drawing it. And there's a 6-page sequence of tiny CCTV images on consecutive pages. And I think that took me between 1 week and 2 weeks to work that sequence out before I started drawing the pages. So the only pain in the ass about it is the fact that you're not getting paid when you're doing that. But most comic book pages, you read the script, you do the thumbnails, you choose from the thumbnails the ones that best tell each moment of the story, but also best work as a sequence.
Yeah.
And then you draw the pages, and it's usually fairly painless, and it's usually fairly rewarding. Those sequences that are very, very complex and take a long time to work out, when you eventually get them worked out, it's caused you a lot more pain, but it's actually much more rewarding once you're there. So I'm glad it doesn't come up all the time.
But I was gonna say, go please.
It's a good part of the job. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Now,
That's it. Yep.
if you click on the space bar, sometimes it just mutes. I'm sorry.
Right.
I was saying that, yes, of course, it's a pain in the ass. As you said, not being paid for all the research and previous work, but I can imagine, and it happens to me, with other things, that when it clicks, you're like, fuck yeah. Sorry for me, because it was like, finally. And then you make it work, and you're like, you know what? It's been worth it. Do you think
it makes all the hard work worth it, all the pre-planning? Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see. Chris knows, Frank, do you still work in an artist community? As you could see in the documentary, What Do Artists Do All Day?
No, I don't. I stopped working in the studio last year. I've been in comics 30 years now. 31 years. And for the first 20 years, I worked from home. First in my mother's house, then when I get married in our first flat, and then in the house that I'm in now. And then the last 10 years, I was in a series of different studios in Glasgow city centre. I live just in the outskirts of the city. And I enjoyed the sense of community, but the last few years, I haven't been enjoying the commute. Mm-hmm. And also, there are a lot of distractions because every friend that you know who happens to be in Glasgow that day will pop into the studio to see if you fancy going out for a drink, So, I came back and started working at home last year, the end of last year. So, and it's suiting me better now. But one thing I should mention about that documentary, What Do Artists Do All Day? In all the years that I've worked in studios, and it's been 10 years, I've worked right through the night and slept in the studio maybe 6 times in 10 years. And when I was talking to the program maker, one of our conversations before we started filming, I had mentioned on the occasions where I have to do an all-nighter. And he said, well, you sometimes sleep here? And I said, very occasionally. I said, could you sleep here when we're making the documentary? And I was like, yeah, okay.
Okay. And, I'll do it for you.
But the thing is, so many people that I know, not just other comic artists and writers, but like aunts and uncles and cousins, like so many people got in touch and said, you really need to spend more time at home, you really, and I'm like, it's not really like that. It's not with the family. I don't actually live there.
That's funny. Jose Enrique Machuca says, Frank is the best narrator, storyteller in the medium, period. My question is, what amount of time does he spend thinking about the narrative of a page? Or is it he considers it an instinctive skill?
Up until quite recently, I spent too long thinking about it. When I started off, I didn't know anything about comic book storytelling. So I would read the script and I would imagine it in my mind, and then I would draw it just to make it as clear as possible. But I gave very little thought to how the page could sometimes end up looking boring because I had too many medium shots, And I worked with an editor, Dan Raspler, and he told me some fairly basic stuff about once you've made an establishing shot, you've got 2 people in a room in a situation and they're having a conversation. You don't need to keep seeing the whole of the room all the time. You can then go in for close-ups of facial expressions or somebody wringing their hands because they're nervous. We already know where those 2 characters are. And so Dan was the editor who was most responsible for me to start taking a real interest in the different ways the story could be told visually. And over the years, just because I was so eager to keep learning, it got to the stage where I was doing anywhere between 4 and 10 thumbnails for each panel description on a page. And both Grant and Mark, because they both live in the same city as me, both of them on separate occasions took me aside and said, "What's the problem? Why are you getting slower instead of faster?" And I would explain that I was exploring every possibility. You know, it became almost like a compulsion. And Grant kept saying to me, "Trust yourself. How often do you go back to the first or second thumbnail that you draw?" And I said 9 times out of 10. But I really enjoy the process of exploring the different ways of doing it. And he said, "Go with your gut instinct." And I knew he was right, but I couldn't quite do it. And eventually, and it was when I was working on Jupiter's Legacy at the start. So, I mean, this was good 5 years ago or something now. Mark said, you know, like, "Would you consider speaking to a hypnotherapist?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "One of my neighbours is a hypnotherapist. He's retired now, but he still takes on clients on a one-to-one basis." And he said he stopped one of my friends from smoking. He stopped somebody else from drinking. You know, like, and sure enough, I saw this guy 3 times, and I was cured. And since then, I've gone back to trusting my instincts and only doing 1 or 2 or maybe 3 at the most thumbnails for each panel. So
I should talk to one of those to stop smoking then.
So it's both a deliberate learned thing, and it's also an intuition.
Yeah, it's one of the artists I work with, Jesus Said, had the same problem. He could lay out every head 10 times, 12 times, 15 times, the same head, and even if it was this tiny. And I always went back to him and said, exactly the same thing Grant told you. How many times do you go back to the first version? And he was 9 out of 10. But I can't stop myself. I just have to try and try if I'm going to find a better version of it. Then I give up and go back to the first one. But if you always go back, why don't you because I have to explore it. I just need to see if I'm able to make it better.
Yeah.
So he's your artist. You're crazy. I love you.
I know. Oh, I know.
Chris North asks, Frank, can you tell us how Mark Millar's reaction was after you did rearrange his writing notes at a party in his home?
I don't know how you knew this. I was at a party in Mark's house, and he took me into his workroom, his office, and he's a beautiful writing desk, and he's got a spinner rack with favourite comics from his childhood, and he's got a collection of original art from artists who've worked on his scripts. And he took me in specifically to show me some of the artwork that he had. And then because it was his party and his house was full of guests, somebody called him and he said, "I'll be back in 5 minutes." And he went away. And I'd had a drink and was feeling mischievous. And he had a big board with Post-it notes. And I started looking at the Post-it notes and thought I could help him out here. And I got some Post-it notes and started writing new material and just, he was, let's just say I don't think it helped his process.
So Frank Howard says, "An honor to meet you, Mr. Quietly. We are very, very big fans of your work in Spain. You left us with honey in our lips when you suddenly left The Authority and New X-Men. Can you tell us what were the reasons for leaving both books?"
Sure. The reason for leaving The Authority, the short answer, the reason I left The Authority was to do New X-Men.
Okay.
The longer answer is because Mark and I wanted we had both liked what Warren and Brian had done with the first 12 issues, and we knew when that was collected as a book, it was going to be something good, something worth having. And we wanted for Mark to write 12 issues and for me to draw them all. And we explained to Wildstorm that I wouldn't be able to stick to a monthly schedule. So it would run slightly late, but the short story is they drafted in fill-in artists and they started changing my artwork without asking me, like censoring things. And there was various other kind of politics going on in the background, and I ended up leaving early to go and do New X-Men. And with New X-Men, I didn't leave New X-Men early. I had no contract. I wasn't contracted to do a set number of issues. They knew that I couldn't work to a monthly schedule. So Grant had written a lot of scripts ahead of time. So they gave me the first 3 to kickstart the Grant's run. And after that, Grant would just give me scripts when he had scripts ready, and I would draw a script and give it back. And then I'd get another one from a bit further down the line. And I just did that until I got the offer to do the short Sandman story with Neil Gaiman. And so I left to do that. And by the time I had finished that, Grant had started writing We 3. So I didn't go back to X-Men.
So it actually worked out well because you had the chance to do the Sandman story and then jump in directly to We 3, right?
Yep.
And was it We 3 a project as fulfilling as it looked? Because I remember when you guys finished it, reading it and saying, this probably looks for me like for you guys had to be really fulfilling as a project.
We 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very fulfilling. Yeah. I mean, right from the start, Grant said I would like us to do something different from the way we've worked before, and it was just, funnily enough, when he first mentioned it, I didn't think it sounded like a good idea. He said that he had a number of different ideas for creator-owned books, and he told me about Vinamarama, and he said it was like a kind of Muslim Bollywood type thing, a Muslim Bollywood soap opera, I think he called it. And I said, all right, okay.
Wait, what I could have said, wait, what?
And I said, what else have you got? And he said, and I've got a thing called Sea Guy. And I said, what's that about? And he was like, it's a guy that lives in the sea. I thought, right, okay. And I said, and he said, but the one I really want you to do is called We 3. And I wasn't that keen in the description of the other two, so I was really pleased that this was the one that he wanted me to do most. And I said, what's We 3 about? And he said, it's about a cat and a dog and a rabbit, and they wear suits of armour. And of course, I burst out laughing and said, no, what's it really about? And he was really annoyed. And he was like,
no, don't tell me. Please tell me you answered back. Are you kidding? No, that's not. No, you're correct.
And I actually thought, once I realised he wasn't kidding, I was like, right, and I pretended, like that I wasn't surprised. And I said, yeah, okay, well, tell me about it. And he started talking about it, and I remember thinking, this has got to be the first really bad idea you've ever had. But the more he talked about it, the more I started thinking, oh, wait a minute, this could be good. And then when I started trying to design the armour for them, it started making more sense. And then when I saw the first script, I was just like, yeah, this is tremendous.
Was it that the more he told you, you started to visualize it in your head and then you got convinced it could work or not?
It was partly that I was visualizing it, but it was also partly that he was explaining what seemed to me like a very simple linear story that we would tell in a kind of a dynamic way. So it was a combination of things, but I'm so glad we ended up doing it together because it was very satisfying.
Let me see. Hi, Victor Herrera says, hi from Colombia, Frank. You are a master, very big fan. Chris North asks, Frank, what makes it attractive for you to work with Mark Millar? And did he ever force you to watch Superman the movie with him?
He never forced me to watch Superman the movie with him. No. The first time I worked with Mark was on The Authority, and it was actually Grant who asked me to work with Mark. He said that Mark was going to take over The Authority, and Grant had warned him that he would need to have an artist that could carry the stories because Brian Hitch and Warren Ellis had worked so well together that if he went on with an artist that he didn't sync with, that he didn't resonate with, then it was going to make him look bad. And I think the way Grant told it, Grant suggested me, and Mark went, "Oh, I don't know about that." And Grant was like, "You've not worked with him before, he does what you ask him to do with the script. That's one of the nice things about working with him." And I loved Mark's scripts. They were really simple and to the point. They were really enthusiastic and energetic, and they were kind of ballsy and irreverent, and they had dark humor, and they were fun. They were fun stories to work on. And he was, as soon as he started getting pages from me, the feedback was always very, very positive. And I up until the office politics got into it, I had the best time working in that. So, and then with Jupiter's Legacy, what was really nice about that, and this is what's really nice about working on creator-owned stuff, is that you make everything the way you want it to be. You're not following somebody else's continuity. You're not following somebody else's designs. You're not following in somebody else's footprints.
Yeah.
You're just creating something from the ground up, and that's always really satisfying.
And of course, you don't have to cater to somebody's whims about what is proper or not proper for somebody else to see. Like, oh yes, I'm going to allow it to this guy because I like him, but I'm not going to allow it to this other guy because I don't like him. And you perfectly know that is what happened in a certain way. But anyway, let's move over. Causo says, yes, Joker is a mix of King of Comedy and Taxi Driver. Having De Niro on the movie makes it even more noticeable. Francisco Sanchez asks, what was the thing that caused you the most to design? Any folly from Morrison, maybe?
Most difficult thing to design?
Yeah, most difficult is scene to design. Maybe the one we just talked about, the one with double spread?
Certainly with Grant, yeah, probably the scene that we talked about earlier, the double page with the three narratives, that was pretty difficult. The CCTV footage in We3 was difficult. There was a few sequences in We3 that were difficult. The cat going through the panels. With Mark, in issue 1 of Jupiter's Legacy, there's a scene where Uncle Walter, who's a psychic, traps a bad guy in a cube, and it's made up of like sketchy blue line art, slowly going into pencil art, going into color rough, going into finished, and that took a while to work out. But very early on, the first time I worked with Grant, there was a panel in Flex Mentallo, and it's in the 4th issue of Flex Mentallo, and there's 2 shrinking characters, Nano Man and Mini Miss. And
I'm sorry, I didn't remember about
that. They have to shrink down to the micro infinite, and Grant Grant said basically they shrink down smaller than quarks or something like that. I can't even remember. But in the description, he said imagine primordial energy manifesting itself around unseen proton cores. And I sat with that for ages, like an idiot, trying to picture it. And bearing in mind I was working in pen and ink, it wasn't like I was painting it, which wouldn't necessarily have made it much easier. But I ended up just doing some circles and squiggles. But yeah, that was pretty difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine the description. You're like, okay, squiggle, circle, that's it. Move on. Anyway, Chris Noth asks, Frank, do you have any plans to start an artist YouTube channel in the future?
Oh, not yet, no. Every now and again somebody tells me that I should do a how-to book or a YouTube channel or a Patreon thing or something. And at the moment, I'm too busy and I wouldn't stay committed to it. I don't have any social media. There's more than one Frank Quitely Twitter, and none of them are me. There's a Frank Quitely Facebook page, which is a fan page.
Yeah, and also the Instagram one, that is also a fan page. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. So I've got no social media, and even with, I mean, the answer I always give for not having social media is that I can't keep on top of email. You know, and one of the things that's happened since lockdown, and I've never been able to answer more than a quarter of my 1 in 4 emails, you know, like, is very good for me. 1 in 10 is more normal. And I did, at one point, I did try to get on top of emails, and I found that I wasn't doing any work. I was spending nearly all day, every day for like a week, just answering emails. And the problem is, you answer an email to somebody and they fire one right back at you.
Yeah.
And, I remember Neil Gaiman did a talk about this, about the fact that he, at some point, he became a professional email replier. And so I just gave up again. And what I found at the start of lockdown is that a lot of people had more time on their hands, so they decided to reach out to friends they hadn't spoken to for a while, and other people were just genuinely feeling moved to get in touch with people because it's an unusual time. And my inbox just went crazy. You know, like I was getting so many emails. I was reading emails and thinking, God, I haven't spoken to that person for years. I'll need to get back to them. And a couple of hours later, that was like a way down off the bottom of the page. And it's impossible for me to keep on top of emails. So I can't imagine having a YouTube channel or a Patreon channel or anything like that.
And have you ever thought about teaching, like an online course?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've actually spoken to people about it. I've been approached about it a couple of times, and I do occasionally do a little bit of teaching. I sometimes there are a few lecturers who work at Glasgow School of Art who are interested in comics, and I occasionally get invited up to talk there. I've got a professor friend at Glasgow University, Professor Lawrence Grove, and he's an academic he's also the head of the Bande Dessinée Society, and he's a huge comic aficionado, and he's also the guy that put on an exhibition about the Glasgow Looking Glass, which he maintains is the world's first modern comic book, predating Toffler and predating Punch and predating Gasoline Alley and all the
Yeah.
other early stuff.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes go up and do talks with him, or we sometimes go to other countries and do talks at at various, usually academic conventions.
Mhm.
And I've been invited to a number of schools and colleges where the students are somewhere on the autistic spectrum, and the staff have found that the comic form is a really good way for people on that spectrum to communicate. It's a very rewarding way. It's something they can all engage in, and so I've been a bit involved in that too. And recently, I actually there's a Book Week Scotland is a festival that encourages reading and creative writing, particularly in young people, and I've been invited along to do talks there before. And this year, because of COVID, I had to make a video talking about coming up with story ideas and whatnot. But so I mean, I enjoy sharing my knowledge and sharing my experience and giving people my opinion and what they're doing well and what they should work on. But I don't know that I could do it on a regular basis. I don't feel like I've got to the stage yet where I want to be a teacher. I think I've still got too much that I want to be doing as a creator at the moment. So,
I was asking because Peter Bag told me a couple of days ago that he was contacted by the Great Courses. I don't know if you know those, but do you just do like 10, 12 episodes, like a full complete course. Then they publish it, with they should you with your examples, blah blah blah, and it's on. That was most what I was asking about. Like doing a complete course, like 6, 4, 8, whatever number of classes. You think you should tell for your I don't know, storytelling and composition or something like that. More than I meant that more than just a regular teaching job all the year.
Right. Yeah, I could do something like that, but I'm going to have to get on top of my deadlines. Project I've just started. I'm late started. I'm not in deadline problems yet, but I am starting it later than I wanted to, and then of course if I do a teaching thing, it's going to be the next in a long line of excuses for why I'm not bringing out my own short stories. So
yeah, then guys, that's a priority.
That's true. Okay.
I'm kidding. Pedro de Mercaderas, Frank, is there a chance to see you creating more non-superhero stories? I love With3 and all your work, mostly because of your world building. How you build worlds from nothing?
Well, you'll be glad to hear that of all the short stories I've written for myself to draw, there's not one of them that's a superhero story.
Good.
They're all set in something like the real world.
Is there any? You mentioned horror before. Is there any genre that calls you in particular as a writer? I just thought about that they're like, I need to do horror, I need to do a slice of life, or I need to do I don't know. Of course, this is not going to be a western, but if it was Garth in your place, you could probably say, yeah, I want to do war westerns. But you know what I mean? Is there any genre that you say, this is the one that I grew up with, that I would love to do, that is not superheroes?
Horror, I think, is I think most of the stories I've written have got some element of horror or some element of black humor.
Okay, let me see. Frank, what is the attraction or motivation for you to switch between mainstream and creator-owned comics?
Oh, I think the way things have worked for me over the course of my career, I started off in small press. Then I worked for the people that published Judge Dredd. Then I started working for Paradox and Vertigo. So that was like Paradox Press was the like short black and white stories, and Vertigo, of course, is non-superhero stuff for the most part. Grant Morrison wanted me to go from doing Flex Mentallo with him to then doing JLA. Alan Grant wanted me to go from doing Lobo with him to Batman, the Scottish Connection. And, you know, like, one thing after another. It was after working in comics for a few years, doing things like 2020 Visions and Flex Mentallo, things that nobody had heard of, to be able to say I'm drawing Batman, there's a satisfaction in that. You know, you feel that to some extent you've arrived. And similarly with
the X-Men,
and similarly with All-Star Superman. But I grew up reading short comic book stories like Sinister Tales and Weird Science, and you know, Tales of Suspense and all that kind of stuff. And I've got a great love for that type of thing, or perhaps a slightly updated version of that type of thing. And it's kind of where I want to head back to at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I just did I did a Batman cover, a Batman and Robin cover, and a Joker cover, like in the last month. You know, I still, you know, I can still enjoy a good superhero like graphic novel. You know, if it's well written and well drawn, mm-hmm. you know, and if it's got any kind of fresh take at all. I mean, I'm still open to that. But superheroes aren't my first love. I've been really lucky with the ones that I've done, you know, and most recently, you know, I was really lucky with All-Star Superman and with Jupiter's Legacy. They both worked out very well for me, you know, and but at the moment, and it's been going this way for years, I feel my heart is slightly more in the non-superhero areas.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that in the future, if you get, as you said, an amazing story, an amazing script, you read it and you're not going to say, it's superheroes, I don't want to do it. It depends on the project, right? In a way?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Pedro de Mercader, what's the hardest thing for you about trying to express emotions, the characters' emotions with images?
No, it's not the hardest thing. No.
No, I think what's the hardest part of it for you to try to portray emotions in the characters?
What's the hardest part of trying to portray emotions?
Yeah.
It's not making it's not overdoing it. That's the hardest part. You know, I look back on a few times when I've really overdone it, and I wish I could take it back now, you know. But sometimes when you're working very long hours and you're trying to get things right, and you draw something and you think it's okay, and then you come back and look at it with fresh eyes and you know you need to change it, or worse still, you see it printed in the comic and think, oh, why did I not notice that? He's really overacting. And you've got to be careful. I mean, you can't underplay it so it's not obvious. You know, you need to make it obvious, but it shouldn't be like melodrama. It shouldn't be like really bad acting, and occasionally it is. You know, that's just mistakes happen.
You never want to make it a soap. That's what you mean.
That's it. Yeah.
Like Santa Barbara or things like that.
I loved Santa Barbara. That was one of my favorites.
Sylvia CJ says, "Hi, I am a fan of." Okay, I was expecting this one. "Hi, I'm a fan of Robin Williams and your work. How was the idea of making the CD illustrations for Robin Williams created? Stay safe."
It was very exciting. I mean, I really admired what Robbie's managed to do with his life and with his career. He's become an institution in the UK, and although I wouldn't have called myself a Robbie Williams fan before I met him, because I recognised he was very good at what he did, and he had a few songs that I really liked. "Come Undone" was one of them. I thought that was a great song, but he sparked up a friendship with Grant because of some common interests in occultism and the tarot in particular, and sigil magic and all this kind of thing. And they started talking about Robbie and Grant collaborating to make a series of images for inside the CD that were based on the tarot.
Mm-hmm.
And Grant said that he wanted me to be the artist on it because Grant knows from having worked with me that if he asks me to do something and I spend a week doing it and it's not right, and he says, "This isn't really what I want, can you start again?" He knows I will, because, a big part of my job the biggest part of my job when I'm working with a writer is to give the writer what they want. I'm telling their story, and Grant knows that I'll just keep going until I get what he wants. So I met Robbie on a number of occasions, and I was actually really taken. But he's an unusual mix of having a gigantic magnetic personality and being slightly insecure.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very genuine guy. At least that's the impression I got. And I saw him in concert a couple of times during the period when we were working together, and he's actually a really remarkable performer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like we were saying earlier on about sometimes it's nice to step out of doing comics and do something completely different, and that was really completely different. And I'm really glad I had that experience. I'm glad I met him. I'm glad that he ended up being happy with what Grant and I produced for him. So it was a great experience.
Okay. Victor Herrera asks, "Is there a chance we could see your logo in the future?"
Sorry, you phased out there. See by what?
Is there a chance we could see your Lobo story in the future?
I don't know. There's a couple of problems with the Lobo story. The main one is that I penciled it in blue line, but I penciled it very, very lightly. And I think I have most of the pages here with me, but I tried a couple of years ago with an artist called Rob Miller, who was assisting me with scanning, flatting, inking, various things. We tried to scan the pages and contrast them so that they were readable, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. It's funny, the Lobo story is actually interesting because it was that was a project I worked on with Dan Raspler, where I sent the pages in. I had been reading Lobo because I liked what Alan Grant and Simon Bisley in particular were doing with it, and especially when Simon was following Keith Giffen's layouts, and to get a chance to work on a Lobo story was tremendous. And I penciled the pages very lightly in blue and sent them off to Dan Raspler in a FedEx box. And I was sure that he was going to get back to me the next day and tell me it was better than he expected from me or whatever. And like a week went past and he didn't get in touch. And when he eventually phoned me, his opening line was, "Dude, I don't know how to tell you this." And my heart just sank. And he just said, "Listen, your drawings are great. You've told the story like as though it's really happening, but it's like you've made it boring." there was a fight scene, and I had choreographed a fight scene. It was a punch-up, and he said, this is like watching a boxing match from a fixed camera. He said you can see that, like when a right hook's getting thrown, he's stepping in with a left, and then he steps in with a right for a left hook and all the rest of it. And he said, you can see it all working. He said, you've put loads of thought into it, but you've got 2.5 pages of medium shots. It's literally like sitting watching the boxing on your television. And he said, it's like, start with an establishing shot, then first or second punch, go in for a close-up so you see a tooth coming out. Like, it's Lobo, it's meant to be anarchic. The layout's meant to be anarchic, and this looks like a Tintin, comic. So he wrote me a bunch of notes. He typed them out and sent them to me in FedEx. And it was just page 4, panels 2 and 3. And he would tell me what was wrong with them. And he just went through the whole script. And I sat and I read that and reread it. And I was hoping to find examples of where I thought he was splitting hairs or nitpicking or being overcritical. And he was bang on the money with every criticism he gave me. And I was just like, why didn't I think of that? And that was a real turning point for me, But,
David Aja, hey, hello David Aja. Hi, been
Huh?
a long time. At last I come here, just wanted to send you to a big hug. I actually wrote to you, Bin, today. What a chance. Love you, moi. Love you back.
David, I got your email just this afternoon, and I was from when I read the email at first until about 5 minutes before starting this talk, I've been sitting looking at the examples of the work that you sent. So don't worry, I'll be getting back to you for sure. And yes, like J.G. Jones, David's another one. He's another one of these artists where I look at his work and it puts me in the mood to draw.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at his work, and the thing is, I remember looking at JG's Marvel Boy, and actually thinking, this is so slick and so accurate, but it's so kinetic as well. I mean, it's like it's really working in every possible way, and he's doing a lot of what I do, but he's doing it with a kind of finesse that I don't have. I've got different stuff going on from him, but like I could see that there was something that he was doing things that I wasn't doing. And similarly with David, it's at the opposite end of the spectrum. It's that kind of David Mazzucchelli type thing, and I'm sure he's sick hearing that. But there's an economy of line. There's a simplicity with David's stuff. I was actually looking at the first issue of Seeds this afternoon, and there's so many examples of beautiful panels where, it's just like one of the female characters was taking off a t-shirt, and the simplicity of the line work is really it's beyond impressive. And it's the fact that, and this is true of anybody that can really master that economy of line. It's the fact that when you're looking at it, you're seeing something that's absolutely real and absolutely convincing. But you turn it upside down and it's very few lines. It's like it shouldn't work with that little information, and then you turn it back around again, you're like, wow. So yeah.
He's an absolute genius. David is one of the ones that I say his brain works in terms of, I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, but this is how I think. In terms of pattern recognition, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's able to go to the most, not simple. I don't want it to sound bad, David. It's exactly the opposite of what I mean. The most,
quintessential.
Exactly, the most quintessential things that our brain is going to recognize because of our, pattern recognition. As it's live, hearing a leopard, or a lion behind the bush, and we need to run away, this kind of things that he does is like you are going to recognize it instantly with
Yeah.
3 lines. He's that good at being quintessential.
Yeah. And another thing about the pattern recognition, and this was true of Hawkeye, and it's true of Seeds as well, where he's deliberately choosing symbols and repeating them as themes and motifs throughout the work in a similar way to what was happening with Watchmen, and similar way to what was happening in Killing Joke.
Yeah.
You see repeated motifs. He's quite a talent.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Quite a talent.
Don't let it go to your head, David. I know it won't, because you're an amazing and a really humble guy. Javier Olivares, another genius. Hello, Frank. In a video I saw some time ago, you said you like to draw the first ideas you have directly in the printed script. Meanwhile, while you read it, I do exactly the same process when I draw. For me, the first ideas are like some precious insects. They only live seconds, and you have to catch them quickly. Is this the reason why you do it?
Yes, but as I said earlier, I started developing a very bad habit of not trusting that instinct and doing a second and a third and a fourth thumbnail sketch. And it was using up a lot of my time, and it wasn't worth it. And I completely agree. 9 times out of 10, your first instinct is your best. If you're in the frame of mind where you're really thinking about it and you have some experience. I mean, obviously, what I was doing at the start of my career, my first instincts weren't always my best because I didn't have enough knowledge and enough experience. But once you've learned the basics of good storytelling, then you should start trusting your instincts, for sure. Yeah.
The Widowmaker 999. Okay. I love your work, Frank. Particularly one of my faves is with 3. I pick it from myself once a year at least. Many thank you for doing it. Big hugs. David Rubio Matellanes, what is the most interesting thing that you have learned in the last year?
In the last year?
I guess he means because of COVID or something like that. Or I'm gonna make it that. Yeah, if anything.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've learned this year is that you can use WD-40 to clean things. You know, the aerosol, you know WD-40?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very good for cleaning things.
3 en 1. we got 3 en 1 here. Yeah. Okay. See, that I'm sure that wasn't the answer you were expecting, but you got one. Question, Caulso. Question in case somebody hasn't asked this yet. What is the favorite page of yours that you have? What is the favorite page you have drawn? What is your favorite page you have drawn?
I don't have a single favorite page. There are.
That's like picking between your sons and your daughters, right?
Yeah. Sure. There are some elements of. There's no pages that satisfy me completely. Every page I've ever done has got something on it I would like to change. Some pages have got more about them that I like than others. The short story, the Sandman story I did with Neil Gaiman, because I painted that, and it was the first time I'd painted for 10 years. There are bits of that story that I like, just my work there because of the way it looks. There are bits of All-Star Superman that I like because of the way they've affected the fans. There are bits of We 3 that I like because there are things that Grant and I decided to do with the storytelling that now get taught to people learning comics. Absolutely. And that's very satisfying. But I don't have a favorite page. Okay. I feel very lucky with many of the projects that I've been involved with, but I don't have a specific favorite.
Okay. Angel Perez, have you watched Doom Patrol on HBO, the TV series? Do you like their version of Flex Mentallo?
I haven't watched Doom Patrol yet. I have seen one still of Flex Mentallo standing in a park with a female beside him. And sure, yeah, I mean, he looks good. But there's always that thing for me that, and this is one of the reasons I haven't seen very many of the superhero movies. Superheroes work in comic books for me, and they can also work in animation. But when they're in live action, it starts to look like cosplay.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got nothing against cosplay, but
Absolutely.
you know, when you read like, your favorite Batman comic or your top 10 Batman comics, the ones that you really rate, because it's a comic book, because it's comic artwork, because you grew up knowing Batman as a comic character, it kind of works. As soon as you have a man dressed as a bat and there's bad guys with machine guns, there's something about that kind of doesn't work anymore for me. It's like if a bunch of career criminals in Glasgow were turning over a bank and a guy showed up dressed like Batman, even if it was a really, really good latex and rubber or leather or whatever suit, even if it was steel panels on it and stuff, everybody would start laughing. And for me, there's something about seeing actors dressed as superheroes that just looks odd. And I've had the experience where you start watching the movie and then you forget, but it's for me, they just work better as comics.
Yeah, I love Doom Patrol because the TV show, because it's absolutely nuts. It's following on the steps of what Grant did and what you guys did on Flex Mentallo. So I honestly don't care about the suits or that. Of course, you can see that Cliff Steele, the robotic part is obviously fake and all that. But I am in the story like, what? It's gonna look fake. It's Doom Patrol.
Do you know what? I'll give it a go. I'll try it. I watched the first season of Umbrella Academy, and I actually really enjoyed that. So I'll give it a go.
Patrol, the good thing about it, and I think it's the best, honest to God, the best DC or Marvel show, like by far, because it ignores we have to be a superhero show. It's not that. It's what you and Grant did, in what he did in the ongoing series. Is just going nuts and not giving a shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's HBO. It's like we don't care. This is what we're doing. If you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I think it's really fun because it's just they don't, they just go for broke. So I'm going to give it a
try. I will take the recommendation.
So then see if you like it. Let me see. What is the process? Angel Perez has. What is the process for you to design a cover? How do you decide what's in it? You have freedom to decide what you want to put on the cover, or you have any specific instructions by the editors in terms of what we have to see on the cover. I mean, I guess he means, the angles or etc., something like that.
Sometimes the writer has a very specific image that they'll describe the way they would describe like an interior page or an interior panel. And sometimes they just have a vague idea. Sometimes the editor has a very specific idea, sometimes just a vague idea. And sometimes both the writer and the editor are happy to say, this is what the story's about. Do you want to just give us some roughs and we'll see if anything kind of flies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can be any of them.
There's not much more to it. That's true. Chuck Arnold.
Oh, hi, Chuck.
When will we he probably asked you this a million times? When will we get an artist edition of All Star Superman?
Right. I don't know. There's a bit of a problem with that. Back when I was doing All Star Superman, it was a friend of mine, Jamie Grant, the guy who did all the scanning, all the cleanup, the digital inks, the colouring, and Jamie. And I'm not blaming Jamie because I should have taken responsibility for having a copy of all the scans myself. But Jamie had all the scans for the pencils on an external drive or on the computer that was linked to the scanner or something. Anyway, as far as I'm aware, those scans are lost. So the only way to do an artist's edition would be to track down all the people who own the original art. And Chip Kidd has got one full issue 10. And I have got one full issue, which is the one where Lex is in prison and Clark goes to visit him. So there's no Superman in it. It's just Clark and Lex. So those two issues are complete and would be easy to rescan. Nearly every other page has been sold and some of them have been resold. So it would probably be a difficult job tracking them down.
Yeah, I remember when Eddie Campbell wanted to do a new edition of From Hell, and he started tracking people to see where the pages were. And he told me about it because I have one that he gave me as a gift, many years ago.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, "Do you still have it?" Like, of course. Do you think I'm gonna sell? I've never sold out at all. It's always gifted. It's like I'm gonna, especially if it's From Hell. Do you think I'm gonna sell it? No, it's here home. Can you scan it for me? And I was like, why? Oh, because I want to do a new edition with new scans, new quality. And I was like, wait a minute, you wanna do the whole thing? Yeah. And you sold them all? Like, yeah, most of them. How many pages that was? Like, yeah, I think it was like 400. So like good luck with that. I don't know how he did it, but he could get 99%, 95% of it scanned by the people he sold them. So maybe he had a list like page 1, page 2, or he sold them directly to people. But
he's more organized than me.
Yeah, but in your case, if it was sold or resold, maybe you could do, do a campaign for people to scan, and you could get most of them, right?
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you know what? DC Comics, you sell the book, you do it. You do the scan campaign. You do the work. He already do it, and you paid him for it. So it's not Bean's work, or it shouldn't be, at least. Let me see. Victor Herrera asks, is Conan still your favorite movie?
It's what?
Is Conan the Barbarian still your favorite movie?
No, it's not. I think it was definitely my favorite movie the week after I saw it when I was in my early teens. But and there are still scenes that I love. The scene of the those kind of outlaw warriors riding through the forest at the start with the horns and the fog and all that. I mean, it's got its moments. I actually saw a tiny bit of it within the last year or two, where Arnie was sneaking about inside a castle or something, and he had no dialogue. He just had to kind of nod and he couldn't even do that. It was his first. He did become better at acting over the years, but he wasn't even good at silent acting. He wasn't even a good extra back then. But no, it's not.
I have to move my neck. I don't know, move your neck.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but you can see that on the movie.
Not my favorite movie anymore. No.
I teaching Arnold Schwarzenegger how to act. Move your neck. How to move your neck without looking like a robot. I'm sorry. Anyway, Alejandro Germanico, also amazing artist, says, I am late, but in time to make it known my admiration, absolute admiration for this man. Calusas have a page from Hell. Yes, it would be great to have Eddie Campbell in the channel. Yes, I already asked Eddie. Some patience, please. Not before I go on break on August. Bob Michelini, 21st. Jaldi from Scotland. Can you tell us about your plans to write and draw your own, create your own work, please? I think you're late, Bob, but he already told us about that before. But yes, he wants to do a project, but everything else, the world is against him, and he's not letting him do it. World, stop working against Frank. He wants to do his own stuff. If possible, please get somebody to pay him a lot of money for doing it. Just so you know. Jack Purcell, what is your next project? It's a secret project.
It's a secret.
So, and Alan Robinson, hey Frank, I love your style. It has influenced me to improve as an artist. Do you watch lots of show camera videos? Your images look like show camera images. Gorgeous.
No, I didn't, but thank you.
I don't know what he means with show camera videos. It's 140 minutes. We are like 6 minutes away from 2 hours here already. So let me do a last question, and we stop because you have to go back to work and your family. I don't want your wife to kill me. Well, I would let her kill me because she's good people and I deserve it. But anyway, not today. Are you thinking in long term? Will you ever leave comics? As you said, for animation or something like that, or comics are always going to be a part of you as a creator?
Comics will always be a part of I suspect comics will always be the biggest part of my career. As I say, I do enjoy other challenges, other creative challenges. I would like to get back at some point to just making images for the pleasure of it. I sometimes go to life drawing classes, and it's not to bring out a book of life drawings. It's not to hang on the wall in the house. It's just for the pleasure of making the drawings. I fill sketchbooks with doodles and scribbles. I've done that all my life. I would like to get back to maybe doing some etching, some lithography, some monoprints. I'd like to get back to doing some painting. But I'm always open for interesting collaborations in commercial art. But comics is my first love.
Alan Robinson clarifies and says, I meant that Frank's images are images that you have to take your time to admire.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you.
We have to. It's the law. You have to watch his images and admire him because he's the best. What can you do? Have you ever thought about yourself as a movie director? And I mean, sometimes when you talk to other artists or to editors or creative people about comic artists, and I agree with it. Yeah, I think the writer is is the writer in a way, the concept guy. But by the end of the day, comic artists are the director of the movie. If we talk about comics, they're not movies, but you know what I mean. Have you ever considered yourself as a movie director in a way, or thought I would like to direct a movie, not animation, but a live, I like a live movie based on what your vision is of things as a creator?
I have considered it, but it's not a burning passion. The short screenplay that I wrote for The Actor Friend, I would probably direct that myself. If I had time, I would direct it myself. I don't entirely agree that the writer is just the writer, because most writers that I've worked with give direction as well.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That said, you give the same script to 10 different artists, you'll get 10 different results back. So it is absolutely a collaborative process. But unless you're working to a Marvel style script, if you're working to full script, then most writers would have to take part credit for the direction. One of the short stories that I wrote and then expanded episodically, I was talking to a television producer about that, and he asked me to put a teaser trailer together, like a storyboard. So I storyboarded instead of, and it was a different process from doing it as a comic, and it was an interesting. It's certainly interesting, but it's something I wouldn't mind trying for the experience, but it's not a goal that I've got, and comics are in no way like a stepping stone for me into film or television. They're very much, comics is a thing that speaks to me in a different way from the way film and television and the written word does. So I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, you do comics because you love them, and if you do something, as you said, refresher, to play with the other muscles, but by the end of the day, you go back to comics. You don't do comics
Absolutely.
because you want to. Okay, I'm going to do comics to try and get to do movies. Same way, I've never thought about Grant in that way. I never thought Grant was doing comics to try to get movies done or TV done. That happened, and same with Millar. That happened. Nice, but I never thought about then. Writing. Yeah, I'm going to turn this into a movie. Maybe Mark now, of course, because he has the Netflix contract, has to think this way. But they're always.
But even Mark, he's still bringing things out as comics first. Even now that he's with Netflix, so he's not just giving them ideas for television shows and letting them do what they want. He's bringing out new comics.
Yeah, that's what I meant. He creates the comics first, even when,
because that allows him to cement his vision of what it was meant to be.
Absolutely. But by the end of the day, we are all comic creators who love comics, right? That's the reason we do it.
Yeah.
Not because of the money, as we said before. Okay, so it's right now 2 hours, as we said. Final thought. I love you. I love your work. I miss you. Man, I hope this stops sometime soon so we can see each other.
Yeah. I look forward to getting together with you again.
What? Sorry?
I look forward to getting together with you again and sharing some good food and just talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And to all you writers, I consider you co-directors. You are like the Russo brothers. That vision of one or the other being the director and the other writer. If it's like the relation, Bean has with Mark and with Grant, I think that's the perfect thing because it's like this. By the end of the day, it's just symbiotic. One feeds off the other. And I hope that's how comics should be. Well, anyway, to all of you, thank you so much for being here. Please don't cut Frank because I want to say proper goodbye to you after we cut the feed. To all of you, thank you so much. Frank,
thank you
for being here. And to all of you, tomorrow with us, Mr. Marcelo Frusin. Hope you like it. Hope you have a great day. Wear your mask. Don't be an asshole. Talk to you tomorrow.